and welcome to the Professional Learning Asynchronous series. My name is Martha Thibodeau, and I will be your host for the Blended Learning series. I am currently an MLTI ambassador, working with the Department of Education to provide professional development around the state. This is my 40th year in education, much of that time spent in middle school, teaching math and social studies. I look forward to exploring blended learning with you, and the first video will focus on the introduction. The second video will be the student experience. The third video will be the teacher workflow for an effective and efficient blended learning classroom. And then the fourth video, we will finish with a look at some of the tools that you can use to make blended learning successful in your classroom. So in this video, we will define blended learning. We'll look at 3 models of blended learning. And then we'll look at some activities and sample lessons and resources. Much of what we look at today comes from Dr. Catlin Tucker's work around blended learning. Let's look at the definition of blended learning. The Christensen Institute defines blended learning, as you see on the screen, 3 separate parts. At its core, blended learning is an integrated combination of online and in-person learning. The online piece should inform the in-person experience and vice versa. For the most part, blended learning takes place in a school setting where the teacher is there to guide the students. There are a few exceptions, and we'll talk about them in one of our models later on. The third part of the definition is the part that makes blended learning high quality. It's the personalization of learning, giving students choice over time, place, or path. This perhaps is the most difficult part for a traditional teacher. Blended learning is not just a tech-infused classroom. When students are using their tablets, their Chromebooks, their laptops to take notes or do research, that's awesome. Maybe the teacher's using an interactive whiteboard or Google Classroom to share documents. That's great. However, it's just doing the same thing more efficiently with technology. Those are pieces that can evolve into blended learning with the integration of student choice and personalization. It's also not pandemic teaching or hybrid teaching. Sometimes during the pandemic, we were teaching directly to students online. Sometimes we were teaching to students online and students in class at the same time. When we were teaching online, we'd let students go and do work so they weren't staring at a screen the whole time. Let's face it, we were just trying to give them a learning experience that they could grow from. We didn't give a lot of choice and personalization, right? The third thing that blended learning is not is unstructured chaos. Although it may seem like it when we're talking about personalizing all these lessons and letting students choose their own pathway. If you read Dr. Catlin Tucker's blog post that I've linked on this slide, you'll see that she has classroom routines that minimize or even eliminate the chaos. So we're about to delve into our 3 different models. And the first model that we're going to look at is the station rotation model. Now, in this model, students move in groups, and the different stations can be modified for each group. So let's look at direct instruction. Right? We split the group into 3 models in this case. Could be 4, could be however many different models, rotations you have. But we're going to do 3. So group A is getting direct instruction right now. And when the teacher deems it's appropriate, they will move, and group B will move, and group C will move. And the teacher will modify that direct instruction as needed for each group. The online activities can also be structured for each group or each individual. Students could have a playlist of things that they have to choose from, and each playlist could be different. Offline activities can also be altered. Maybe you're doing individuals work for some students or small group work for others. So A would go from direct instruction to online to offline. Okay, let's see what Dr. Tucker says about horizontal planning in the station rotation model.
With your agenda, which means lots of teachers plan their lessons with a linear agenda. We're going to do this first, and then this, and then that. And they might have 3 or 4 tasks on the agenda for that day. And so my idea is if you kind of go horizontal and you just take each of those tasks and make it a station, it's an easier way to kind of go from a traditional lesson plan to a blended lesson plan. So if we're going to read an article, if we're going to have a discussion, if we're going to go over grammar, why not have a small student-led discussion group, a small group reading and doing annotating, and then one group over here doing the online grammar piece. So we're still getting through everything that would be in a traditional agenda, but it's happening in stations as opposed to us walking through it kind of lockstep as a class. And when you move through a lesson lockstep as a class, there are fewer opportunities for kids to get support, ask questions, and so stations just create that kind of natural environment where kids can collaborate, they can problem solve together and ask each other questions.
The next model that we're going to talk about is the whole group rotation model. So this starts with the whole class getting direct instruction, or a hook, if you will, from the teacher, setting them up for the lesson, getting them interested. And then the entire group moves to online or offline, it doesn't matter which one comes first, at the teacher's discretion of time. And during this online and then offline activity, the teacher is doing formative assessment by walking around the classroom, asking questions, answering questions, guiding students, observing work, maybe having side-by-side assessments of the students' work, and then there is formative assessment at the end, also in the form of an exit ticket. So that assessment is happening throughout the period. And let's hear what Dr. Tucker has to say about transitioning to the whole group rotation model as a traditional classroom
really
teacher.
Traditional teachers, the whole group instruction or the whole group rotation is probably a little bit easier for the initial transition, where, typically without technology, a teacher would lead a class through a series of activities in a lesson. And you're doing the same thing in the whole group rotation, you're just rotating through activities that are online versus activities that are offline. So it kind of models a traditional classroom, except you have that technology add that still allows students to control kind of the pace at which they're learning and even the path.
So even the path of what they're learning. Now, the next one that we're going to talk about is the flipped classroom model. So here you see the students are at home and learning, and they might be listening to a certain type of music on their phone. They might be doing some research. They might be watching a video that their teacher did. They might be listening to a podcast or looking up images. But they're doing that work at home, and then they come to school. And then at school, the teacher guides them through activities. For example, maybe at home they have to find 3 videos on the same topic. And then when they come to school, they're going to do some online and offline activities that analyze those videos for accuracy or content information. So they can go to online or offline or some of both. They may be doing a mini flip where they're doing online, short online video at home, at school, and then working in offline groups. And formative assessment is happening during that beginning stage. Dr. Tucker says when she has them take notes at home, then the first part of her class is taking a look at those notes and asking questions about them. And like I said, it's not just about teacher videos.
One misconception is that the flipped classroom, you have to flip with video, and that's not the case. I think you can do a really dynamic flip with images. So having students go on like a virtual museum tour or analyze and discuss a really complicated infographic, or even with text, if you're using something like StudySync where they can use an annotation tool, they can look up words, they can make notes about what they're reading, then text can be a dynamic flip too. So I hate when the conversation is myopically focused on videos, because videos really isn't the only way to flip a classroom.
So now let's take a look at a classroom where the station rotation model is happening. So in this first session, this is the teacher-led station, and this progresses linearly from the hook, getting the kids excited about the lesson, to a second part, which is I do, we do, you do. In other words, in the I do section, I'm up at the board, or I am leading a discussion on something, and then we do, so you're going to take part in what I'm doing, and then you do. And that you do could involve small group work or individual work. And then we do the homework check and the review after we've gotten ready for the next section. And then the teacher asks students to move to, let's say, online activities. Okay? In online activities, students put their mathematical reasoning into action. You might have individual self-paced work in an online activity like IXL, Khan Academy, some adaptive personalized practice. Or you could have some collaborative small group things like a math scavenger hunt, or having them create a video that shows a solution to a real world problem. Okay. And it all spirals back to the teacher-led session. And then in the offline activity, again, not only does it go back to the teacher-led session, it also goes back to the online activity. This offline activity allows them to collaborate and gives them a chance to put their mathematical reasoning into action. I have given you some websites here, which is kind of ironic since these are offline activities, but they're great resources. You're going to go online, get the directions like at Yummy Math for an offline activity. It might be you have directions that you print for students, or game cards, or worksheets, or maybe it's directions on a specific game. So those are just some of the websites that you can use to find some of those activities. Okay. So here's a list of tools that we've used in our work with blended learning. We'll look at some of them during our week 4 video. And you can go and look them up on Google if you want. Some of them were new to me this year, but almost every one I've used at some point in time. So, for example, let's say I want my students to watch a movie, but I also want them to answer questions during that movie. Maybe I'll use a tool called Edpuzzle. Maybe I'm looking for an entire concept that I need one student to do online for me because they are so advanced. I could go to the OER Commons or the MIT K-12 videos. In the previous one, I said they could do a how-to video or a real-world problem solution video. Well, you could have them do that with WeVideo or Screencastify. If you want your kids working on whiteboards and working in a collaborative environment like Google Classroom or Google Drive, you could try something like Jamboard. If you have questions about any of these and how they can be used in blended learning, let me know and we can have a conversation around that. Again, we'll look more at these in week 4. I'd also like to share a couple of books from Dr. Catlin Tucker that I've gotten a lot of my resources from. And then the last one is her blended learning blog. And in her blog, she is very generous with her samples, worksheets, sample planning guides, and the different types of learning, as well as discussing them and activities that you can do. So her blog is very valuable. Okay? And let's take a look at some of the things I've gotten from her blog. Here's a sample math lesson. It's about explanation and modeling, and then you've got a whole group activity, then an online learning activity. That could be the whole class together. It could be more of a station rotation model. And then there's a science one. It's like a mini flip, like we talked about earlier. So they're doing a 10-minute video in class where they watch the video, take notes, and then they do a whole group activity, and then they do an online collaborative activity. That's more of a whole group rotation method. And then there is a history lesson. In the sample history lesson, she walks you through, again, a whole group activity and gives you some ideas of what you can be doing with your students. Okay, this is Blended Learning in Action, Practical Guide, and it's a wonderful book. All right. If you have questions about blended learning, you can reach me at martha.thibodeau@maine.gov. I'll be happy to answer your questions or find someone who can. I'd be happy to provide more resources or collaborate with you to help incorporate blended learning into your classroom. I look forward to seeing you again in the next video, which will be the student experience with blended learning.